Ubisoft sent me an early copy of Assassin's Creed Shadows for review. I only had time to put about 20 hours into it before the embargo lifted, so this is my review of the first 20 hours. I guess a first impression, extended first impression. In that time, I got through about 40% of the main campaign, so while there is still a lot left and things could change, I do feel like I have a solid impression of how I feel about the game so far. And based on what I've played, I feel like this is a huge step in the right direction for the franchise. It fixes a lot of the things I've had issues with over the last couple entries, while bringing back some of my favorite parts of the older games. That being said, it's not a perfect execution. I do still have some problems with it, but let's get into all of that. Assassin's Creed to me is a franchise that's kind of lost its identity ever since it switched to the RPG structure. And I think the biggest thing that Assassin's Creed Shadows is trying to do, and mostly succeeds at, is merging the older style of gameplay and re-ingratiating themselves to their older fans with the newer style of RPG gameplay and still servicing the new fans of the franchise. The RPG elements are still very much here. You can change out your weapon and armor for ones with better stats, and there's multiple different colored levels of gear. You find a lot of chests that contain resources that you use to upgrade things. Both Yasuke and Naoe have skill trees, and in that way, it does feel like a continuation of the newer style of Assassin's Creed gameplay, but with a big caveat. This game, more so than any of the previous ones, can also be played mostly as a stealth game if you really want to. This is done through a combination of having Naoe specialize in stealth, but also having an abundance of options in the settings to tweak your gameplay. You can change the difficulty of exploration, stealth, and combat all separately, and most importantly, you can toggle on an option to make assassinations always be an instant kill no matter how much health the opponent has. This allows you to nullify the RPG elements for assassinations and really helps emulate the older style of gameplay while still having the option to lean into the RPG stuff for the players who want that. Not all these things are new to Assassin's Creed Shadows. They've been adding this stuff to the previous games slowly over time, but I think it all really comes together in Shadows in a way that genuinely feels like you have an option of playing this game pretty close to the way that they used to feel. And since you have the option to change between them pretty much whenever you want, it really lets players play the game however they want to. If you want to focus on just stealth, you can do that. If you want to focus on just combat, you can do that. If you want to switch back and forth, you can do that as well. There are some side quests and optional activities that can only be completed by one character or the other, but for the most part, you can play as either one pretty much all the time. There will also be story missions where certain sections have to be played with one character or the other, but it does a really good job of making this balanced and make sense within the context of the story. However, there is one major caveat that I wasn't expecting, and that's that you don't have access to Yasuke right away. You do play through a prologue where you play as both characters and see kind of their intros, but then after that, you have to play as Naoe for a pretty long time. For me, it took about 15 hours before I unlocked the ability to play as Yasuke again. All of this makes sense for the context of the story, but I do think it's important to note that if you're excited to play as Yasuke, you will have to wait a little while and get through a couple story missions as Naoe in order to play as him. Ultimately, I think this is a good idea though, because with Naoe being a weaker character, it forces you to get better and understand the combat mechanics. That way, when you get Yasuke, who is a much more powerful character, you actually understand the combat mechanics instead of just brute forcing your way through every situation. Now that we've gotten the overview out of the way, I want to break the rest of the review into parts. First, I'm going to talk about playing as Naoe and using stealth. Then I'm going to talk about playing as Yasuke and the combat. Then I'm going to talk about the open world. And finally, I'll speak a little bit on the story. Again, haven't finished the game, so I don't want to speak too conclusively about it, but I'll talk about how I feel about it so far. And then at the very end, we'll wrap up. To me, this is the best the stealth has felt in this franchise since Syndicate. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that this is possibly the best stealth that they've ever done in the franchise, because you have so much control over your freedom of movement. The ability to go prone adds so much to stealth games for me, and with that comes a lot of different ways that you can approach objectives. You can crawl through tall grass, you can go through crawl spaces and come up trapdoors, you can crawl into ponds and then use a reed to breathe and hide underneath the water. And there's a big emphasis on shadows. It's not just a word they threw into the title, it is a core mechanic of this game. As long as you stay in the darkness, you're pretty invisible to most enemies at most distances, which makes nighttime infiltrations a lot easier, but also encourages you to use the darkness to your advantage and create new paths with it. You can throw a kunai to knock out a lantern, you can extinguish a candle, and this, along with some really smart level design layout, really lets you manipulate your environment to use to your advantage. Moving in and out of cover and moving around corners feels really good. There's the right amount of stickiness to having her stick to the wall and kind of peer around corners before you move around. It just feels really good. They also scaled back how much you can climb on stuff, as opposed to Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, where you can pretty much climb on whatever you want. In this game, it's more similar to the older ones, where there's specific things that you can and can't climb on, but to help alleviate this, there's a grappling hook, which the grappling hook also leads to some really cool moments. It's fun to swing off a tree branch and then do an aerial assassination, or quickly ascend up onto a rooftop as an enemy is coming around a corner to check out a sound. I love playing as Naoe. There are so many cool moments where you just feel like a dope assassin. And if you do get stuck in combat with her, you're not completely helpless. But the nuts and bolts combat mechanics are identical between characters, so I want to transition into talking about Yasuke when we talk about the combat. Yasuke is an ox. He is running through doorways, he is smashing crates as he walks over them. He hits really hard and is very satisfying to take out enemies with Yasuke. Like, you just see their health bars get decimated, especially on smaller enemies. And there's nice feedback to the combat. The hits feel impactful. The combat is similar to the other RPG Assassin's Creeds, especially Valhalla, but it is a little bit different. Combat during the RPG era of Assassin's Creed always felt to me like really watered down Souls-like type of fighting, whereas in Shadows it kind of feels like they're taking a page from the earlier entries and having it more focused on counters. I understand parries were things in the other game, but like the emphasis on countering in this one kind of just reminds me of the like Arkham style combat that the early Assassin's Creed games had. There's way more depth to it than that. Like, you have to read the different types of attacks. You can also use your abilities. Dodging and positioning is a big thing. And some of the weapons even have legitimate button combos that you can do with them. And while you are super powerful, you can still get overwhelmed easily if you don't manage the amount of enemies that you're fighting at one time. And overall, the combat feels pretty competent. I don't have any major complaints about it, but it's also nothing particularly special. Like, I'm not going to remember this combat system in like 4 months. It's not really the type of game where the combat is something that sticks out, in my opinion. It's not bad by any means, but it's also just not all that interesting to me. After long periods of being stealthy, I like using it as a palate cleanser to just like rip through enemies, but I definitely think Naoe has easily the more fun gameplay. However, if you really like the RPG era of Assassin's Creed, I think you're going to be right at home with Yasuke, so it does feel like they're giving something for the new fans and something for the old fans. Next, I want to talk about the world, and this is the biggest mixed bag, because I have some high praise about it, but also has some of my biggest complaints about the game. First of all, the world is absolutely beautiful. It is less stylized than something like a Ghost of Tsushima, but these realistic tones can still have really eye-popping colors, and there's amazing effects going on. And a lot of this has to do with the phenomenal weather system that the game utilizes. The game runs through the 4 seasons, and each season has 2 phases to it, so technically 8 seasons altogether, and each one brings something really different and interesting. Spring and summertime have thunder and rainstorms. The fall has like a torrent of leaves that will just come through on windy days. And obviously, wintertime it snows and things freeze over. And these season and weather events not only look cool, but they also change the way the game plays. If it's pouring rain, it's going to be harder for enemies to see you, and it's going to be easier to mask your sound in the rain. In the wintertime, a lot of plant life withers up, so there's literally less things for you to hide in. There's not as much tall grass, there's not as many bushes, more fires are lit up, making it harder for you to hide in shadows. In general, it's harder to sneak around in wintertime, so there's some things I just simply don't want to do until spring comes back around. I also really like the way you find objectives in the open world. In the past couple games, you have this bird that you can use to scout out areas around you, and it kind of, to me, broke exploration and also made finding enemies on bases way too easy. They got rid of the bird for this game. Also, Eagle Vision from the earlier games is back, so that's nice. But in terms of exploring the world, you're given directions on where to find your objectives, and you have to like actually find them. Like, you have to follow the directions and actually put in the legwork to find the objective of who you need to talk to or where you need to go. You do have scouts that you can send out and find these objectives, but you only have so many of them that you can use per season. And you can also use scouts to bring resources back to your base, which we'll talk about the base in a little bit. But in general, it feels way more useful to use the scouts for resources and then just put in the legwork to find your objective. And finding your objective was a lot of fun for me. Some of my favorite moments in the game are just wandering around the open world, looking for things, slowing down, paying attention to the environment, taking stuff in. And a lot of the joy with this comes from the fact that they're a lot more restrained with what they put on the map in this game compared to other games, which is a problem amongst a lot of Ubisoft games, especially in recent years, but kind of forever, has just been the abundance of how much stuff is on the map. You're just inundated of question marks everywhere, and a lot of times it can kind of feel like you're just running from question mark to question mark almost mindlessly, and they've done a lot to alleviate that with this one. Only big main stuff gets question marks on the map. The rest of the stuff you just kind of organically find as you're walking around. A lot of the most interesting things I've found were not on the map at all. It was just something I passed by and then I discovered. This could be a cool location or an NPC who waves me down and wants to talk to me, or sometimes it's a whole side quest. However, as cool as these moments are, I will say one of my biggest criticisms is that they don't happen enough. A lot of times you'll go somewhere and you'll feel like, oh, there's got to be someone here to talk to or something to do here, and there's just kind of nothing. And in general, these emergent moments are vastly overshadowed by just how many enemy bases there are. They have dialed back how many enemy bases, but there's still way too many. And that's my biggest problem with the open world in general, is that it's still too repetitive. It still feels like it's a little too big. It still feels like there's too many enemy bases. It still feels like there's too many massive forts where you do the same thing every single time. It's a lot less copy and paste than the other games. Like, each base does feel unique and have unique layouts, and there's a lot more intention put to the level design in this game than the previous RPG games, but there's just still too many of them. You don't have to like do all of them. Only the big bases get checked off. The rest of the ones are just things that you can do if you want to. But still, it's just like, it feels like I'm running into them a lot and not running into the other stuff nearly as much. Not to say that the open world doesn't have anything else to offer. There's some cool like platforming puzzle solving dungeons. You can do horseback archery. Naue has some meditation mini games. There is other stuff to do and find in the open world. It just feels like that other stuff is vastly overshadowed by how many enemy bases there are. And I get it, the game is Assassin's Creed, not Meditation Creed, but like, I don't know, it just still feels like I'm doing the same thing way too much. The other thing to talk about with the world is your base, and this is one of my favorite new additions. You can literally construct your own little town. It's the main thing that I spent my resources on, and it kind of reminds me of like Dark Cloud on the PS2. You constantly find stuff out in the open world to add to your town. You can buy stuff from shopkeepers to add to your town. If you stop and pet animals in town, you can add those animals to your base. And it looks like there's a lot of stuff to customize and upgrade about your base as you go. You also find people out in the world to recruit and bring back to your base. Some of them open up new things, like a blacksmith will open up a forge. Other of them are warriors that you can call into battle when you're out in the open world. And I really like stuff like this in games. It kind of feels like Suikoden when you're recruiting people to come back to your base. The problem is, again, this just doesn't happen frequently enough. In the 20 hours I played, there was like 3 people that I recruited back to the base. I want to like populate this with like a whole village of people, and maybe you do get there, but it just feels really slow going. I don't really want to speak too much about the story of this game because I haven't finished it, but so far I really like the setup. The intro hooks you in and gets you invested in Naue's story in particular. I don't know as much about Yasuke right now, but I do like the way the two complement each other. And the story is setting both of them up to be very flawed people. It's not trying to paint you as like some holistic hero. It's very obviously stating that you are also doing wrong. In your quest to do what you're trying to do in this game, you're also assassinating so many people, and that affects other people in the world in a similar way that the wrongs done to you have affected you. And in general, I'm just really engaged to see where it goes next. The game is also super polished. I was playing in fidelity mode. It looks great. It ran out of lock 30. I didn't encounter any major bugs. It only crashed like twice, which for an open world game, that's not too bad. I didn't encounter any major bugs throughout my playthrough. All the animations are super polished. Everything looks really good. The cutscene choreography and cinematography is really dope. Really great music. In general, I think Assassin's Creed Shadows is a super solid Assassin's Creed game. It is kind of the refinement of everything they've been doing with the RPG stuff, while also bring the franchise back kind of to its roots with the gameplay of Naue. That being said, it's an Assassin's Creed game through and through, especially from its open world design. And so here's the thing. If you've ever liked Assassin's Creed, I think you're going to like this game. If you've been recently out on Assassin's Creed and burned out by the RPG aspects, I think this will bring you back in. I do think you'll really enjoy this game. If you've liked the RPG stuff, you're going to love this game too. But if you've never liked Assassin's Creed, or you're just not really big on Ubisoft open world design, like, this is not the game that's going to change your mind. Like, this game is not for you. I don't love putting a number score on this because I haven't finished it, but of the first 20 hours I've played, it's feeling around an 8 out of 10 to me. A super polished Assassin's Creed experience, but is still an Assassin's Creed experience, so your mileage with this game is going to vary greatly on how you already feel about this franchise. If you end up picking up the game, let me know in the comments how you feel about it, and if there's anything else you want to know about the game, please let me know and I'll try and answer them the best I can. And if you haven't already, give me a follow.